Explain quantum computing to me.
Quantum computing is a type of computing that uses quantum mechanics principles to process information. In simple terms, it makes use of the ability of quantum bits or qubits to exist in multiple states at the same time, instead of just 0s or 1s like classical bits, which enables it to perform computations in parallel. Quantum computers are built using specialized hardware that can manipulate qubits and perform operations on them, such as entangling them and measuring their state.
Explain like I'm a 5-year-old child.
Quantum computing is like having a really special toy that can do many things at once. It's like having a magic ball that can be in different colors and shapes all at the same time. This toy can help grown-ups solve big problems, like figuring out very hard math problems or making secret codes, much faster than normal toys. But this toy is still very new, and grown-ups are still trying to make it even better.
Create an image of a cat working on a futuristic interface. So this is the voice assistant app that we are going to develop. We'll be using ChatGPT and DallE API along with Flutter to build this voice assistant. So let's get started. So the first step is to create a Flutter project. So to create it, we are going to run the flutter create command and then the name of the project followed by --org, which specifies the organization name, and it's going to be com.revan.allen. We are specifying an organization name here because randomly it generates com.example.allen and testing it on a real iOS device isn't allowed. That's why we are specifying an organization name right now. Then we'll click on enter. Then we can move to the Allen directory and open it in VS Code. After that, we can go to the lib folder. In the main.dart file, remove the my homepage class, remove the comments in my app class, and create a new file called home_page.dart in this. And we'll import material.dart. We create a stateful widget, call it home page, and return a scaffold. Now I can take this home page, pass it in over here. Let's remove this. We'll just import it using this line and then we'll save it. Now let's run the app on an iOS simulator. If you want, you can go ahead and test it on an Android emulator as well, just to see that we got the basic app running. So let's run it without debugging. And while the app is running, let's go ahead and install some assets that are required in our app. The assets can be found on this link. I'll mention it in the description below. What you need to do is go to this folder and install all three of these fonts, which will add a unique font to our app. The image, which is the virtual assistant image, you can use your own if you want, and sounds, which is related to speech to text. So when we get to it, we'll be using these three audio files. After you've got the folder with you, just open the Allen folder and drag the assets folder to it. After we do that, we get an assets folder right here. Now we just need to go ahead and register all of these assets in our pubspec.yaml. So let's go ahead and do it. So here in the assets part, let's uncomment these things and add assets/images. So it will register the virtual assistant image. So we'll remove this. Then we need assets, sounds. Then we'll remove this line. So it will register all the sounds. And this is all that we need. Then we need to scroll down and register the font. So let's uncomment this line. Let's call this Serra Pro, which is the family name. Then we'll register the font, which is assets/fonts. Then we need Serra Pro bold.otf if we just see it over here. And similar to this, we need Serra Pro medium. So let's register it right here and save it. The style is going to be, it's not needed. So let's remove it actually. So we have these two assets and this is the font family. We are going to access these fonts using this family. Now we can exit this. Let's see. This is our app, an empty scaffold. That's correct. Now let's remove the debug show check mode banner. So it will remove this line at the top. And also we'll change the title. So let's call this Alan. We'll also remove the theme data. It's not required anymore. And the last thing we need to do before moving to the UI part is installing the colors that are required. So we'll again go to this GitHub repository, go to the lib folder, go to palette.dart and copy this. This contains all the colors required in our app so that we don't waste much time writing them all. Now we can go ahead building the UI on our homepage. So the first step to it is just adding a theme here. So the theme is not going to be theme data because we'll have to put in a lot of things here. What I want to do is theme.light because we want a light theme for our app. But if we just do light theme, what happens is this background isn't pure white. What I want is pure white, but it gives us somewhat grayish color. So I'm just going to copy with and pass in a background color, which is scaffold background color, and change it to palette.white color. Palette.white color is basically colors.white. We are just storing all the colors in one single class so that whenever we want to change the theme of our app, we can do it from one class itself. Also, one thing I want to do is use material 3 set to true. That means my entire app is of the design of material 3. If you want to check out the difference after we build the UI, you can set it to false and see how it looks with and without material 3. There's not much difference, but it just looks better in my opinion with material 3. Now let's get to the home page and start designing the app. So the first thing that is required is the app bar. And just so that we are on the same page, I've opened this file. So this is how our app bar looks here. What we need is a title, and then in the corner we need this menu icon. So let's get it. We have an app bar, we'll pass in an app bar. Then in the title, we are going to pass in a text, which is going to have a text of Alan. And also we'll put a const, and then in the side we need this icon. So to get this, we are going to pass in a property called as leading with icon as icons.menu. This is also going to be a const, and save it. Also, since we added some things to our pubspec.yaml file, let's restart our app and see how it looks. So app has restarted, and if we see, we are having an app bar with a menu icon. But if you closely observe, the color of the app bar is different from this body. The reason for that is in the main.dart file, we have registered a theme where the scaffold background color is white color, but we have not specified that the color for this app bar should be white as well. So to do that, we are just going to mention app bar theme over here, pass in app bar theme, and the background color is going to be palette.white color. Then we can save it. And if we see, both of them are of the same color now. Also, in the title, right now it's in the center because we are running it on an iPhone simulator. But if we run it on an Android emulator, this text will be here. It's not in the center. So to always make sure that it's in the center, we are going to have center title set to true. So let's go to home page, and here we'll pass in center title true. Now we need a body, so we are going to have a body where we are going to pass in a column, and in those columns we are going to have a children. Why do we need a column? Because if you see this, we are going to have this image, we are going to have this part right here, we are going to have this text, and then we are going to have these 3 suggestion boxes. So we need a column so that we can lay them in a vertical orientation. So let's pass it in. The first thing that's needed is this part right here. So let's figure out how to work on this part. If you closely observe, this image is bigger than this circle. That's the kind of design we want. So we can't use just a container passing in the background image over here. What we need is a stack so that we can have a circle background, and on top of it we have this virtual assistant picture which looks slightly bigger than the circle behind. So to demonstrate in code, what I'm talking about is just having stack, then we'll have children again, and the first child that I want is this circle behind, because that's how stack works. Thing that you mentioned first is going to be below. So we can just pass in a container where the height is suppose 120, the width is 120, the margin is constant edge insets dot only, and from the top I want 4. That means the app bar and this, they're not stuck together and there's a difference in them. But if I do just this much, it's not visible on the screen. To make it visible, I need to add a color. So I'm just going to pass in decoration, which is going to be box decoration, pass in a color, and the color is going to be palette.assistant circle color. Now if I do this, you can see this right here. But it's a square, right? It's not really a circle. So to convert it into a circle, we'll pass in a shape property, which will be box shape.circle. And then we have a circle with us. That's looking great. But what I want to do is put it in the center. So to do that, I'm going to wrap my container widget with a centered widget. After we do this, this comes right in the center. Perfect. Now that I have circle with me, let's put a const here. I want the virtual assistant picture to show up. That means I want to access this virtual assistant image. So to do that, I'm just going to pass in another container. Then I'll pass in a height, which is going to be 123. I said it's going to be slightly bigger than the circle, right? That's why the height is 123. Then the decoration, which will be box decoration. Shape will again be box shape.circle, so that, we have this aligned with the circle that's going to be behind it. And then we'll pass in the image. And the image property is present on the container. We didn't pass the image property here, as I said, because we want this image to be slightly bigger than the container. So we have this image, we'll pass in the decoration image, and then the image here is going to be asset image, because we want to get access to this image, right? So we'll pass in the asset, which is assets / images / virtual assistant .png and save it. Now let's put a const over here so that we remove the warning. If you're wondering why I'm getting the warnings in line, it's because of the extension here, which is error lens. So it will show all the errors to you in one single line. And now if we take a look at the app, here we have it. Let's expand this app so that it looks bigger. After this, what we need is this part right here. It looks like a chat bubble saying, "Good morning, what task can I do for you?" So in this case as well, we are going to use a container. So let's get out of the stack. So this was the profile part. Let's call it virtual assistant picture. After this, we need to work on the chat bubble. Let's call this chat bubble because this is the place we are also going to get our outputs, right? Now let's get to our container. We are not going to specify any height because whatever height we specify, it might exceed that. For example, "Good morning, what task can I do for you?" has a specific height. But if the ChatGPT's response comes, it's going to be bigger than this. So we can't specify any proper height because we don't know what the output is going to be and how many characters long it is going to be. So for this, we are not going to mention any height. We are just going to tell whatever the space of the text is going to be, take that much space. But leave some padding for us. Whatever you do, just leave some padding for us. So here we are just going to pass in a padding, which is going to be constant edge insets dot symmetric. And if you see, from the horizontal direction, I want a space of 20, and from the vertical direction, I want a space of 10. So let's pass it in from horizontal 20, vertical 10. Other than this, what else I need is a space from here. So I can either use a sized box over here, or I can just specify margin, which is going to be constant edge insets dot symmetric horizontal 40. So it leaves a margin from here, you can see that. And from the top also I need one margin. That's what I'm going to do now. So from horizontal I need 40, but down below I need 30. But I don't want it at the bottom, so I cannot pass in vertical 30 because from the bottom I don't need 30. That's why what we are going to do here is dot copy with. So it's going to copy the horizontal value, which means left is 40, right is 40. And from the top, we are going to specify 30. Now, let's just see the container, how we've got that. So we are going to pass in a decoration, which is going to be box decoration, border, and border is going to be border.all, where we need to pass in the color, and color is going to be palette.border color. So from all the sides, we are having a border, and the border is of this border color. Now let's see how it looks, and here it is. Now it is not like this, but we can work on it. First of all, this container is looking very small because we don't have any text in it. So let's pass a child to this container so that we have a text, and we are going to call this text good morning. What task can I do for you? Okay, so let's put a const over here. Let's increase the font size as well. So we have style constant text style, where the color is palette dot main font color. Also, let's remove a const here because the text is already a constant, and save it, and here we go. But the text here isn't very big, so let's increase the font size, so that's 25. Save it, here we have it, but the text isn't looking like this. So we need to change the font family, which we've already registered in pubspec.yaml file. If we scroll down, so let's pass it in font family Serra Pro. It should be exactly what you've typed over here. And then save it. And you see the text has changed and this looks much better. However, what I want to do is this text should have much more padding from the top. So I'm just going to wrap this text with a padding widget and then have constant edge insets dot symmetric. From vertical, I want, let's say, 10. Let's remove const from here, and make this entire padding widget a constant. Let's come over here, and this looks better. Now what I want to do is style this. So I want to give it a border radius like this, but here the border radius shouldn't be there. What I mean is, if you look at this part has a border radius, this also has one, this also has one, but this one doesn't have any. So let's figure out how to do that. Here we have a property called border radius, and then we can pass in border radius dot circular 20. If we do this, the entire thing is now circular. This looks good, but if you see carefully, this part is also rounded. We don't want it rounded. So what I'm going to do here is border radius dot circular 20 dot copy with, and the top left part, because this is top left, and we are going to mark it as 0. And the argument type int cannot be assigned to the parameter type radius, so I'm just going to pass in radius dot 0 because it requires a radius, and the radius here is 0. Save it, and here we have it. This part doesn't have a border radius, and all of these things have, and it looks good. Now after this container, the next thing we need is this text. So let's call this suggestions list, but before that we are just going to have our text which says here are a few commands or whatever. Let's see what it says. Here are a few commands. Let's call this here are a few features. Then we are going to have a style, text style. Font family is again Serra Pro. If you're wondering why we didn't specify the font family over here in the theme itself so that we don't have to type again and again, it's because font family is not present in copy with function of theme data.light. If you just use theme data, you'll be able to pass in font family, but when you're using copy with, you don't have access to it. That's why we constantly have to type it out. Here the color is going to be palette.main font color, and font size is 20. Font weight is font weight.bold. So what I've done is given it a shorter height than this. The color is the same and I've bolded it. And if you see, here are a few features. But still this isn't looking very good. So I'm just going to wrap this text with an align widget where I'll pass in the alignment as alignment dot center left, because I want to shift this to the left, right? So I'll save it and here it goes. But still this isn't enough because it completely shifted it to the left hand side. I still want the padding to be there. So what I'm going to do is convert this align to a container. Container is basically made up of several widgets. If you just go inside it and inspect, it's made of alignment widget, padding widget. So we can pass in alignment here. Then we can also pass in a padding which is constant edgeinsets.all, and then I'll pass in 10. Save it and here we are. Also I need some kind of, you can say, margin from here. So we can leave that margin. We have margin edgeinsets.only. From the top I'll leave, let's say, 10, and from the left I'll leave 22. And then save it. So here we go. Looks good. Also let's pass a constant over here. Looks great. In this case, padding and margin are doing the same properties. I just wanted to showcase it to you. If you want, you can just integrate this with a single padding property. But basically in this case, margin and padding are the same things. Of course, if you add borders and stuff, it becomes different. But for our use case, both of them are doing the same thing right now. After having that, we'll get to the suggestions list. The suggestions list is basically this boxes right here that tells us features. So let's just call it features list. And let's figure out how to get done with this suggestion boxes. So here I'm going to specify a column widget, pass in children. And why do we need a column widget? You'll understand that when we start integrating the ChatGPT and DallE API. It's basically like we will cover this entire column widget with a visibility widget so that we can conditionally show this column, and it will be much more easier if we have all of these three boxes that do the same work in a single column. But you'll get a greater idea when we get to the integration part. For now, I would recommend you to just follow along. So the next thing is this feature box, and since we have three of them, what I'm going to do is create a reusable widget for it in the lib folder. Let's call this feature underscore box dot import material dot. We are going to create a stateless widget for here and call it feature box. The point of this feature box is just to, showcase the features, nothing much. So here we are going to have a container where we are going to have a margin, and the margin is going to be edgeinsets.symmetric. And if you see, from the horizontal direction, we have a greater margin, let's say 35. And from the vertical direction, there's 10, because the space over here as compared to here, you can see the difference. This is vertical, this is horizontal, right? So let's put a const over here. Then we might also need decoration, which is box decoration, so that we can pass in a color. And the color is going to be taken from the constructor because each of these boxes have a different color, right? So here I'm just going to ask final color. Let's add the final field property. Now I can use this color over here. Then we are also going to pass in a border radius, which is border radius dot all radius dot circular 15. So we are just adding a border radius. We don't have any border. The border is not there, but there's a border radius here, which will help us clip out things. Let's put a constant here as well. We won't be able to see anything, so let's take this feature box, paste it over here. We'll pass in the color. The first color is going to be palette dot first suggestion box color. I couldn't think of any better name. My apologies. And we're still not able to see anything, but that's because we have not put a child to it, so it doesn't have any height. Once we add a child, it will be able to show it to us what we've got. So here we'll pass in a child, and the child is also going to have a column, and then we are going to have children. The first child is text, and this is just going to be this header text. So let's take it from the constructor, because every feature box has a different header text. We'll have this, let's require it. We have required this dot header text, pass in header text, then we'll have style, text style, font family is Serif Pro. If you're annoyed by writing it and feel like you'll forget and mistype this, what you can do is just save it in a new file in a variable which can be used anywhere in your app and just keep using it. That would be a better technique so that you don't have any errors and spend hours on it. So let's pass in a color, and color is going to be palette.main_font_color. Let's not take main font color. This should have a black color, so let's pass in black color. The font size should be 18. And font weight should be font weight.bold. Save it. Also put a const over here. We'll go to the home page. We'll pass in our first header text, which is ChatGPT. Save it. And here we have it. Doesn't look good at all. But this will be better when we have this line right here, because it will take the entire screen width, right? So let's ask for a description text as well. So we have final string description text. Then we are going to require it through the constructor. I'm just going to copy this text and make changes over here. So I have text. This is going to be description text. The font family is Serif Pro. The font size is not 18. It's going to be the default one, 14 or 16, whatever. The font is not bold anymore. And that's basically it. So let's pass in a description text. What is our description text? A smarter way, and all of these things. You can make your own. Just paste it over here. And if we come, you can see the box is now bigger, but it still doesn't look very good. There are multiple problems with it. First of all, the padding problem. So let's pass in a padding to this column so that, these texts have certain padding to them and they are well spaced out like this. There's some padding right here. It just looks cleaner that way. So let's pass in a padding widget where we are going to pass in constant.edge_insets.only. Top is 20, left is 15, bottom is 20 again. So what you can do is, since top and bottom is 20, you can add edge_insets.symmetric vertical 20. So that means top and bottom is 20. And then we want left to be 15. So we are just going to have copy with left 15. So it's the same thing like top 20, bottom 20, left 15. It's just another way of doing it. And we have a better looking box here. It doesn't look, very messy. Next thing I want to do is take this ChatGPT text and push it to the left hand side. So for that, I'm going to wrap this with a container or align widget, whatever you want. Then we can pass in an alignment, which is alignment.center_left. Save it, and there we go. Looks better, and it looks similar to this one. Perfect. Also, if we want to be pixel perfect, what we can do is just leave a size box of height 3 here, so that there's much spacing between these two elements. So let's go ahead here in the home page and put this feature box again. This time we are going to have this text Dall-E. The color is going to be second suggestion box color. The description text is going to be this thing right here. Paste it in over here. Save it, and here we have it. But if you look at this, we have get inspired and stay creative with your personal, and this is looking pretty shabby, to be honest, because it's going too much in the right hand side corner. If you look over here, the personal assistant dropped to the next line because there was something over here. What's that something? That's padding widget. So what we are going to do is go to this feature box, wrap this text with a padding widget, and pass in dot only. From the right hand side, I want a padding of 20, right? So with this, the personal goes to the next line and it looks less shabby. Again, we can go to the home page now and add a third feature box, paste it in over here. This is going to be called Smart Voice Assistant. Paste it over here. Then we'll copy this line, paste it over here and save it. Now to resolve these errors, we are just going to put a constant over here. Also, this is going to be third suggestion box color. Perfect. So our UI looks good now. Next thing and the last thing is the mic button. So you just want to say that, if you want to record your voice, just click over here and then only we listen. So we are just going to go here in the scaffold where we have floating action button. Then we are going to have on pressed, which is going to be an empty function again. Then there's going to be a child and the child is icons.mic. Of course, there's more stuff to be done in this floating action button because just a mic button isn't enough. But this looks good, right? And this is what Material 3 does to us. Material 3, we have this squared kind of rounded rectangle kind of mic or floating action button with just no Material 3. It's going to be a rounded button. Let's see the difference after we add a color to this floating action button. So we are going to pass in the background color as palette dot first suggestion box color. So whatever color was in this feature box, it's going to be over here as well. Alright. And this looks good. Now let's go to the main.dart file. I'm just going to take the simulator from here, put it in VS Code so that we are able to see the difference as we do it. And you'll get a better understanding of Material 3 versus other things in this application, of course. So let's remove this use Material 3, save it, and you see this is the difference. Our app has changed. Basically, the font size and everything, there was much more gap or an increased font size in Material 3. The elevation was not present in the app bar, and the text weren't automatically of the black color when we use theme data.light. If we add use Material 3, this app bar doesn't have any elevation of its own. These things are bigger in size, as you can see, and this floating action button, again if you want to see, was rounded. Here it's squared and looks much better. Okay, so this was about the UI part of this. Now let's get to the interesting part. So now the next thing we want to do is whenever the user clicks on the mic button, we want to convert whatever voice the user gives to a text. So to do that, we are going to use a plugin. Let's search it. We want Flutter speech to text. So whatever plugin comes up first, we are just going to use that. And here it is, speech to text. And it was maintained last 3 months ago. So it's a safe package to use. Let's go ahead and use it. We'll add this dependency. Also, what I've done right now is connected my iPhone to this system so that I can just test it out in real life because I'll have to give my voice. If you want, you can find a workaround in the iOS simulator itself or the Android emulator itself, or just run the app on a real device. So after this is done, let's see if there are any installation processes to complete. Let's scroll down. Here it is, permissions. So we need to add these two permissions in the info.plist file. Just follow this if you're working on on iOS simulator or Mac OS, because you cannot develop iOS apps on Windows. So you can just have info.plist. Let's copy one of the keys here, paste them. So you need two keys. One is the speech recognition. Other one is microphone usage. Also make sure to write a description. Since I'm not publishing it on the Apple or Apple Store, I'm not going to mention any string here as a description. Then we can close this. Let's see what else we need to do. Then we need to add these permissions to Android manifest.xml. So let's go ahead here, paste it in right below this manifest tag. Then if you're using Android SDK 30 or later, so our target SDK in build.gradle is more than 30. So we can just copy this line and we need to add this right after the permission section. That means right here. Let's indent it properly. And there we have it. Looks good. Then we can close this and you can see the optional tab here, adding sounds for iOS. These are the sounds that we've added right here. So if you just see these 3 sounds, these are needed for iOS. So whenever you click on the button, like the start recording button, these sounds will play. So when we start, it's going to start this M4R file. After that, when we stop or cancel, we are going to run these files. And this is only needed for iOS. For Android, it's automatically done. If you just read this through, Android automatically plays system sounds when speech listening starts or stops, but iOS doesn't. So I think we have this done. Now let's try to run the app on our iPhone. So I'm selecting that device, running without debugging, and let's get started with it. And while that is happening, let's go ahead and write some code in our home page. Basically, we want to set up the speech to text plugin, right? So let's go ahead. First of all, we want to make sure that we have instantiated the plugin properly. So what we are going to do is call init state over here. Let's call it. Yep. Also, I think our build failed. So let's look why. Here you can see no profiles for com.revan.allen.allen were found. So to fix this, what I'm going to do is go to my iOS folder, right click and open an Xcode. Then we can click on runner. And then from here, I'm just going to run my app. And if I just minimize this, as you can see, it's running on the iPhone. So that means everything is working well. Our configuration is hopefully working well. And since this is a smaller iPhone, I'm getting this render flow error. So to fix this, I just need to go to the home page, and in the column, I'm adding a widget called single child scroll view. Then we can save it. And obviously, since this is running from Xcode, we'll have to restart the process. So I'm just going to close it from here. Hopefully the issue has been resolved, and try running it from here. And as you can see, the app has launched now. So we have the hot reload feature, and if we come over here, the error has been resolved. Now let's instantiate the speech to text plugin. That's why we have init state over here. So in init state, we are just going to call init speech to text. This is the command we are going to call. Copy this, put future void, and this is going to be asynchronous. And here we are going to use the plugin. So we need access to the object of speech to text class. So let's have final speech to text, which is equal to speech to text. Okay. Now we have this. Now we can use this speech.text and call the method of instantiating. So we can call dot set initialize and then save it. Also, let's await it. And after the initialization process has started, we are just going to call setState so that the build function rebuilds. And we know that it's ready to be used. To know how I found this method, basically it's all written over here. You can follow this documentation and you'll be able to have it. As you can see, await speech to text.initialize. I just edited out this documentation based on my needs. So let's not spend much time over here. What we can do is just copy all of these methods. So let's copy these things, copy it and paste it right here. Also, these are not private methods anymore. We can just remove them. Then let's take the speech to text, pass it over here. Over here, this is just a callback of this, so we can have on speech result. I'll explain what these functions do, but let's just type it out first. Let's resolve all of the errors and we'll have it. Okay, so this is one error. Basically, first let's understand all of these methods. So first of all, we have start listening. After we have made sure that we initialize the plugin, we are calling speech to text.listen. So whenever the user clicks on the mic button over here, we start listening to it, and what it does is basically constantly listen, and whenever the user speaks and speech to text is able to convert that speech into text, it runs the on result function. And in the on result, what we are doing is basically getting speech recognition result, and we are setting state to last words equal to result.recognize words. What this means is this last words is going to contain whatever the user has said. So we can just create a global variable for it. Let's call this last words. You can even name it speech or something. Then we'll take this last words and paste it over here, which already done. Okay. Then we have the stop listening method. Whenever the user is stopped saying something, they can obviously just click on the mic button again and stop listening will be done. Let's remove all of these comments, and here we have it. So one thing to keep in mind is on result, the callback function over here, which we have in the form of on speech result, will only get run when it recognizes some words. And whenever it recognizes certain words, it will just save it to last words. Also, last thing, we can just call dispose method, and in the dispose, we are just going to call speech to text dot stop. We are not calling this method because it will call set state, and if the screen has been disposed of, there's no way we can call set state, right? I mean, we have gone off the screen. How can we run the build function, right? So now that we have this, let's go to the floating action button. Here we have the on pressed, and in the on pressed, we are just going to have an if condition. So we are first checking if the speech to text has permission. So if await speech to text dot has permission. Also, since we call await, we need to call async over here. So if speech to text has permission and speech to text is listening and actually is not listening. So that means if the speech to text has permission and it is not listening, so then we can say it can start recording. So we can just call start listening. Else if speech to text dot is listening, so that means it is listening. That means the recording is on. And when we click on this, we need to disable the recording. I mean, we just need to pause the recording. So in that case, we are just going to call stop listening. And since this function is asynchronous, let's mark it as future void. Okay. Now we can call await over here. And if none of these conditions match, that means we don't have the permission, or that time we are just going to call init speech again, right? Init speech to text function. So that means if speech to text has permission and speech to text is not listening, then we start listening. If the speech to text is listening and then we click on the floating action button, then we stop listening. Else we are going to init speech to text, because that means we don't have the permission. If we don't have the permission, we need to ask it to initialize, and while initializing, it will just ask the user if it's fine if they, start recording. So they need the microphone access or something, that place. Okay, let's open the terminal. Let's restart the app, and here, if you see, Alan would like to access speech recognition. We are going to say okay. Then it would like to access the microphone, and the description here is main, because if we go to info.plist, we have main written over here. So let's put OK over here as well, and then start recording. So in the recording, I'm just going to click on the floating action button. And here you can see, whenever I say something, it's able to recognize it over here. Then we can click on the button again, and you can see finish successfully, invoke Flutter notify status. That means the plugin has stopped and it's not able to identify anymore. And if you see over here, recognize words, and here you can see whenever I say something, it's not proper, but you can see we are getting recognized words. We are getting the confidence with which it said 0.797. That's 79.7%. And these are the alternate things it said. And it's arranged in descending order. So you can be sure that the first result is the most confident result, and that's what we are going to go with. And result.recognize words just does that. Alternates, which is the list which we have right here, dot first, so it's accessing the first element and it's recognized words. Okay, so nice. Now that we have this done, next step is to contact the API. So we need to get access to the Open API. So first of all, we need to go to OpenAI. So let's type here OpenAI, then we can go on their website, then we can move to developers, documentation or API reference, whatever you want. So we have the introduction. You can read all of these things. I've already done it. But basically what we need over here is access to a secret or an API key. So to generate an API key, we are just going to go over here, then click on view API keys. I've already created one. I'm just going to create another one, create new secret key. I'll copy it and make sure you read this. You won't be able to view this API key again. So just save it and directly go to your lib folder, secrets.dart, then a constant OpenAI API key and save it in a string. Of course, you won't be able to access my API key if you try to do that, because I'm just going to delete this API key once I'm done with the project. So make your own API key. If it asks you to log in, you can see I'm already logged in, and then you have to create your API key. Now, after that is done, we can go to API reference, and here we can find everything about the API, the thing we are most interested in. So for authentication, you can see we need to pass this thing in the HTTP header. So first of all, we need to make HTTP calls. So for that, we can install HTTP package. If you want, you can go ahead with DO or anything else you like. We're just going to go ahead with the standard HTTP because that's enough for us. Then if you want to see the models, which one you want to use, you can just do that, but I'll directly get to the point. We're just going to go ahead with the chat API and the images API. One more API which we could have used was completions API, which uses models like text DaVinci or whatever, but I didn't find this API particularly useful in our case. So I'm just going to go ahead with chat, which is chat GPT with the 3.5 model, and images API, which is basically the Dall-E API, which will help us to generate images. So first of all, let's understand what we want to do. And to explain it to you simply, I'm just going to make a diagram. Let's understand what we want to do. Well, we've converted speech to text, so let's make a box over here. So we have speech. Let's put here speech to text. Once we get access to the text, we can use this text to send instruction to the API, right? And from the API, whatever text we get, we're just going to convert it from text to speech. But in this API key, there's a big thing to understand. So let's make a big rectangle. Why is this part interesting? Because, we have to contact two APIs, and we also need to automatically detect if the user wants to generate an AI image or not. That's the tricky part, because we know the user has to use the ChatGPT API and the Dall-E API, right? But how do we know which API to use? So for that, again, we are going to use the ChatGPT API. So let me write it down. We are going to use ChatGPT API at first to know whether we want to use ChatGPT or we want to use Dall-E, right? And in this case, I had tried using the completion API, which is the text DaVinci 003 model, but it didn't return a useful output. That's why we are going to use ChatGPT API here. Now, why are we doing that? Well, I just want to detect if we want to generate an AI art image, or we want to create an image, or we just want to give a useful response to the user. So what I'm going to do here is basically send the text the user has to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will tell us if we want to generate an AI art image or not. So it will be an answer in the form of yes or no. If it's yes, then we will call the DALL-E API. Otherwise, we are going to call the ChatGPT API. If we try to eliminate this process, if we just try to remove this process out, how will we know if we want to contact ChatGPT API or DALL-E API? Because both of them are different APIs, right? Then we'll have to hardcode some string and tell it that if these strings are included in the text, like, image or AI or whatever, then we have to use the DALL-E API. But that's not right, because if the user wants a response from ChatGPT but is framed such that our algorithm just thinks that it wants to contact DALL-E API, it will give the wrong result. That's why we are just adding our ChatGPT model here. So it will cost us 2 requests instead of 1, but we are guaranteed with the result, right? I hope you understood this. If not, let's dive into code and you'll understand it better. So I'm just going to create OpenAI underscore service dot. Then we are going to create a class of OpenAI service, and here we are going to have multiple functions. So the first function that we are going to have is going to return future string is art prompt API, where it will get some prompt and obviously will be an async function. So this function is this part right here, the first ChatGPT. It will just tell us if the user wants to generate an art or not. Then we are going to have something similar. It's going to return a string again, but this time it's going to be the ChatGPT API. So we are going to have ChatGPT API. And after this, finally, we have the DALL-E API. So this function will decide if this function is going to get called or the DALL-E API function is going to get called. I hope you're able to follow along. Now, let's just return a string here saying ChatGPT and a string here saying DALL-E. We'll get to it after we successfully recognize if the user wants to generate an art or not. So let's have here. We are going to create a try and a catch block so that if there's any exception, we just tell it out. So we can just have return e.toString, because at the end of the day, we just have to return a string. And here we are going to call http.post, because that's what the API says over here. Whenever we want to call ChatGPT, which is this URL, we have to send a post request. So first of all, let's import HTTP, and we are going to import it as HTTP with a suffix, and then we can have http.post, then we'll pass in URI.pass, and then we'll pass in the API, which is this part right here. So let's copy it, paste it over here, and there we have it. Now post is going to return something, so let's await it, and then we are going to have final response is equal to this. Okay, but still we are not done with the post request, because we need to add certain things. -h in curl means header, so we need to add these two headers, and -d is basically the body part, so we need to add body over here. So let's have headers. It's going to be in the map format, and here we are going to copy content type, which is application JSON. So let's have content type application JSON. I'm following along with the documentation so that in any case, if the API changes a little bit, you can come to this API and reference it for your own. Then we have authorization, and the authorization is going to have bearer followed by the API key. So we are just going to have bearer here followed by the API key. So we'll have $, and our API key is in the secrets OpenAI API key. So let's have OpenAI API key, and let's import it. Awesome. Now we need body, and in the body we have to return an object. Why an object, not a map? Because we need to JSON encode it. So whatever map we send to it, we just have to convert it to JSON and send it across. That's why JSON encode. And what are the things we need? Well, this is the model, and then we have messages. So we can have messages which is going to be in a list format, and then we are going to have the role of the user. So we have role. So the role can either be user or assistant, or there's one more. I think there's admin or something. But this is the one we care about. Role, and obviously this is going to be in a map so that we can have this role user like this. And then finally we need content over here. So we can copy this content, paste it. And what is the content here going to be? Well, we basically want ChatGPT to say to us if this message the user has, the prompt over here is asking us to generate an AI picture, image, art, or anything else. And we only want the answer in a yes or a no. So we are just going to have the content like this. Does this message want to generate an AI picture, image, art, or anything similar? So if we want to generate picture, image, art, or anything similar, then we'll pass in the message, which is the prompt we are getting from the parameter. Then we'll have simply answer with a yes or no. Okay, so it will help us get the answer in a yes or a no format. And that way we can just check if it wants us to generate an AI art image or not. So after we have this, let's print response.body. Then we are going to have the checking. So if response.status code is 200, that means everything went well. Then we want to do something. So for now we can just say yay. Okay, because I don't have any clue of what I want to do. Okay, and also since we want to return a string over here, we can just return AI. Okay, so with this our errors go away. Now I can take this OpenAI service, go to the home page, instantiate this OpenAI service, which is equal to OpenAI service. Now I'll take this OpenAI service, and whenever the user clicks on, stop recording, that means we have to stop listening. Before that, I'm just going to call OpenAI service dot is art prompt API. Then I'll pass in the prompt, which is last words, because last words is basically the recognized words. Okay. And with this, let's also await it. And I'll restart the app. So now I'm going to click on the mic button and generate an image for a unicorn. Please create a unicorn image for me. Now I've closed the mic. Let's see what it gets. And here is the encoded JSON result. So it was able to recognize please create a unicorn image for me. Now I can go up. And here you can see this is the result from the ChatGPT or OpenAI service, where it says the content is yes. So this is the message we are waiting for, and it says that we want to generate an image. That means it's working. It's able to give us an option in a yes or a no. But here's a problem. Sometimes it can give yes like this. Otherwise, in small cases, like a small yes. So we need to capture all of them. But first of all, let's store this in a variable. So we are going to have string content, which is equal to, and if we just do response.body and try to access this content, we won't be able to do it because body is of the type string. We cannot call methods like this on a string. That's why we need to call JSON decode. Then it will decode this JSON res.body. Then we can access like this. And what do we want to access? Well, our end product is content. So let's see what we need. Well, first of all, we'll go to choices. So we'll have choices. Then we have to capture the first choice because it's in a list format. So we'll capture the first choice because it's going to be the most accurate. Then we'll access the message on it, the message property. So let's have message. And then we are going to access the content property on it. Okay. So with this, we are able to get this content. If you aren't able to do it, you can just do it from here. You get the response here. So we go to choices. Since it's in list format, we want the 0th element. Then we want to go to message, then content. Okay. Now we can just have content is equal to content dot trim. So it will remove any spaces it has, just sanitization, clearing things off. Then we can have a switch statement that says content, and these are our cases. So first case is a yes like this. Then our second case is yes like this. Third case is a yes that we got here, this yes. And the next case is yes like this. So these are the possible yeses we can get. Of course, you can also put case yes like this, but I hardly think we are going to get that. These are the 4 possible options for us. So if any of these cases are there, then what do we want to do? So if it says yes, that means we want to call the ChatGPT API. So we'll just have await ChatGPT API, pass in the prompt, which is this exact thing. Also, it will give us some response. So we have final response is equal to this. Then we can return this response. Then we'll have a default option. That means it's a no or something similar. So we can just have final response is equal to await. And actually here not the ChatGPT API, the DallE API. And here we are going to call the ChatGPT API, then return response. So if it says yes to our message is like this. Does this message want to generate an AI picture? So if it says yes, then of course we need to go to the DallE API, otherwise the ChatGPT API. And we are returning response for them. And here we are not going to return AI, here we are just going to say an internal error occurred. Because if it is not returning response from DallE or ChatGPT, that means something has gone wrong. So this error might occur because the status code is not 200. And if it is not 200, then maybe it is because we have exhausted the API. That means call the API, we cannot call it anymore. So we'll have to generate a new API key or something. So that time we are going to get an internal error occurred. Cool. Now that we know this part is working, we can test it out, but I don't find the need to. Now I can go to the ChatGPT API and call it. So let's copy this entire thing because it's the same thing. This was using ChatGPT to give us an answer. You could use the DaVinci Resolve API, not DaVinci Resolve, sorry. The DaVinci text model, but as I said, it didn't work quite well for me. That's why I'm using the ChatGPT model. And here we have it. So we are going to post to the same API, but this time the message is going to be different because this is a ChatGPT API, right? ChatGPT is able to remember our conversations. So if we wanted to remember our conversation, what we need to do is create a final list of map of string, string messages, which is an empty list. So we have this empty list over here. We are calling it messages. And here what we do is before going into the try and catch block, before making any API request, we just say messages.add. The role of the user is user and the content is the prompt. So what's happening over here is we are just storing whatever the user says into the messages. Why are we doing that? So that we can just replace this entire thing and have messages over here. In this case, the message was just a single thing, which was, does this message want to generate an AI picture? Because it's independent of the context, right? If I say something like generate an AI image for me, my next question doesn't matter to this. It just has a job of returning a yes or a no. But in this case, it has to give smart responses. So we need to store the entire message history in this messages variable. So whatever we say, whatever the assistant says, we have to store all of it over here so that it can remember the context and give us smarter replies. So we can just take this messages Let's remove this res.body. So the content is going to be the same because it's the same API model. But this time we are not going to have a switch or a case. Let's remove this. Here we are just going to have messages.add. Role is going to be assistant. And content is going to be the content over here. So I'm storing everything in this message variable. Over here, the role is user. That means I said it, right? Whatever prompt I pass in, this is what I've said. But here, whatever response I get, it's what the assistant has said. And that will just help ChatGPT to give us better responses, because that's the key feature of ChatGPT in my opinion. It's able to remember the conversation. And based on that, it is able to give, such wonderful responses. Also, we can return content over here, not to forget, because after storing it in the message variable, we have to return something, and that something is going to be content, so that over here we get response and this return response is directly done. Now let's test it out. Let's come over here. We're going to have final speech is equal to await this. Then I'm going to print the speech, and that's good. So let's restart. Let's see what we get. Also, let me think of something I can ask. Something like what is 2 plus 2? That should be good. So I'll just click over here. What is 2 plus 2? And here you can see it was correctly able to identify what is 2 plus 2. And the content here was no. And the response here we got 4. Which is because of this line, print speech. So it's able to give us the correct output. Now the only thing is converting the speech, which is in the string format, in a text format, to a real speech. So we'll do that later, but first let's just get started with the DallE API, because this is going to be a bit different from our normal ChatGPT API. So let's copy this again, paste it over here. Let's move to the images section, which is this part, DallE API. We'll copy this URL, paste it right here. And we obviously need messages.add over here as well. It's not a function thing. I've created this messages variable globally so that all of the functions can use it. And I've added this because later on, if we have questions regarding the art as well, it will be able to tell us, right? That's how ChatGPT will help us. We've pasted the URL. Let's see the headers, content type and authorization. That's correct. The body is going to be different. We just need a prompt. So let's remove messages part from here and the model as well. We can just have prompt, and the prompt is going to be prompt that we got from the argument or the parameter over here. Then you can decide to pass in the number of images you want, the size you want, and the response format you want. I think the default output is a URL, so I'm not concerned about the response format. You can see defaults to URL. Whatever you like, I'll just pass n as 1 because I only want one image to be generated every single time. If you want more, you'll have to customize your way when we display it on the screen. You'll have to use a list view builder to generate a list of URLs it gives. Not too difficult, but I just want to generate one image. Then if the status code is 200, then what do we want? Well, the content is not going to be the same. Let's look at the response that it has. It's way different from ChatGPT. Basically, we have to call data, and again, it's a list. So we have to access the 0th element and call the URL property. So let's do it. We are just going to remove all of these. Then we are going to have data, then 0, because here we have a list, the 0th element, and then we want URL. Of course, if you're having n more than 1, you'll have to customize your way out. Basically, you'll just have to have data dot map and store it in a list format. And here you'll have to return a list of strings. And based on that, you'll have to render it on the screen, but whatever. Then we'll add it to messages. Let's call this image URL so that we are more descriptive about it. And there we have it. So this is the DALL-E API. I'm hoping it works. So let's get it all together. We just have to call this function, and this function does the work of calling ChatGPT and the DALL-E API based on the user's prompt itself. And we are not worried because we know ChatGPT will give us the correct thing. So let me ask something. Let me ask it to generate an image. Generate an image for me where there's a unicorn in it. And here you can see we are getting this image link. And if we just go over there, let's open it. This is an image of a unicorn. So it has been able to create a cute little image, and that means it's working. It's able to correctly identify stuff and put it out. Now the next part is to convert whatever text we have to speech. So for that, we'll have to find a package. So let's go to pub.dev. Then we'll have Flutter text to speech. Here we have the speech to text plugin, but we are not going to use that. We need text to speech. And this is a plugin, but it was last maintained 3 years ago, so we are not going to use it. This was maintained 20 months ago. We are not going to use it. This was maintained 2 months ago. So let's try to use this. Let's copy this. Add it to the dependency. Let's see if there are any installation processes. So first of all, for Android, the minimum SDK should be 21. So let's go to build.gradle. Here the minimum SDK version is 21. Let's close it. For iOS, there's a known issue with integrating plugins that use Swift into a Flutter project with the Objective-C template, but we are not doing that. We have added this. Now we only need to instantiate the Flutter TTS plugin. So let's go right at the top. Let's create an instance of it. Let's import this package as well. Final Flutter TTS. Now we can copy this, and we also need to instantiate this part right here. So let's call init text to speech. Then we can create a method on this. So we have future void. Then this is going to be asynchronous again. Now we can copy these lines. So we have set shared instance to be true, but this is only for iOS part. Then we can call set state in case it wants to rebuild based on this. I don't think set state affects here. Even if you remove it, it wouldn't really matter. But just for the sake of it, and if nothing goes wrong, let's pass it in. Also in the dispose, let's have flutter TTS dot stop. And finally, we need last one function, which is future void system speak. So basically, whatever prompt we get or the content we get, we just have to speak it out using the Flutter TTS model. So we are just going to have Flutter TTS dot speak. Then we'll pass in the correct content, and there we have it. Now we can use the system speak and pass it in over here. Await system speak, and then pass in the speech. Now let's restart the app and see what it gets. And here you can see unhandled exception, missing plugin. That's because we added a new plugin, but we didn't rerun the application. We just need to do that. And after this, let's test our app. I know I haven't been able to test it on Android yet, but we'll do it after we get done with the whole process. So our app has loaded. Now let's try to see what it got. So I'm just going to click on record button now. Explain quantum computing to me in simple words. And I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it has worked. You can try running it on your own iOS simulator, but if it still doesn't work, and if you get like some error that says, the voice wasn't able to run, what you can do is just go to settings. Then you need to go to the accessibility tab in voiceover. You need to go to speech, voice, and change your voice. Once you change your voice and run the app again, it should work for you. And there it is, it works, but still I want to make some changes. What I need to do is whenever the voiceover says something, I want it to display on the screen. Instead of good morning, what task can I do for you? It should show this thing. So to do it, let's create some variables. First of all, it's going to be generated content, and other one is going to be image URL. So generated image URL. Both of them are initially null, but whenever either ChatGPT or DALL-E runs, it will assign the content or variable some value. So let's go down. Whenever we have a speech, first of all, we want to detect if it is DALL-E which is speaking or ChatGPT. Because if it's DALL-E, we don't want it to say anything. We just want to directly show the image. If there's a voiceover, it will tell us the URL, right? Because that's what the speech contains. It contains the URL of the image. So here we are just going to say if speech dot contains HTTPS like this. So if it contains HTTPS, of course, it's a generated image URL. So we'll set it equal to speech. Also, we'll set generated content equal to null. Why is this line needed? Because suppose the user first gets data from ChatGPT API. Then the user generates an image so that it gets data from DALL-E. In this case, generated content and generated image URL both are not null, due to which both will be shown, even this text box and even the image. So we are just setting generated content to null when there's generated image URL, because either of them will be null, because we are never getting data from both ChatGPT and DALL-E together. So we can take this, paste it over here. This time generated image URL is null and generated content is speech. Also, we need to call this system speak only when there's no DALL-E. So let's have this. And then obviously we need to call setState. So we'll call setState after this and setState after this. Why is setState needed? SetState is needed because these values have been given. After these values have been given, we want to render it on the screen. So if there is, suppose, an image URL, we want to show it on the screen. If there's some text, we want to show it over here in this chat bubble. That's why I had commented chat bubble over here. So here we are just going to check remove a constant from here. This will be a constant, but in the text we are going to have if generated content is equal to null, that means good morning should be shown. That means initially or when DALL-E runs. And if it is not null, then we want generated content to show. But generated content can be long, so we want the font size to also change. So here again we'll change this. If generated content is equal to null, then 25. So good morning, what task can I do for you will be 25. Otherwise it will be 80. Okay. Now let's try to run it again and see if it works. So we are just going to have explain quantum computing to me in simple words. And here you can see it has given us a paragraph and there it is. Looks good. Quantum computing is a new type of computing and it's also saying it for me. I don't think you'll be able to hear it though. So now next what I need to do is just remove these three boxes whenever the generated content is there. And that's why we had created a column over here. I said we are going to wrap it with a widget known as visibility. And here we are going to set the value visible. So if generated content is equal to null, then we don't want to show the column. And this way we don't have those boxes. But even then I don't want this thing to be there, this container. So I'll also wrap this with a visibility widget and say it's visible when generated content is equal to null. So if generated content is null, then only we will show this. When ChatGPT gives us some value, then this is not going to be there. Perfect. Now if you come over here, the box has been removed. Great. Now let's try the DALL-E model. So I'm just going to say generate an image for me with a unicorn in it. And here you can see we are getting all of our data back over here right at the top. But we don't want that. We want to remove all of these things that were shown and only show an image. So first of all, let's get an image up. So we can do that right after this part or this part. This looks good. So we can have image.network generated image URL, but this cannot always be there. So it should only be there if generated image URL is not equal to null. So if it is not equal to null, then we have this image.network showing up. But if it is null, then the generated image URL will not be shown. And this way you can see we are getting the image URL, but still we want all of these boxes to disappear. So we are just going to have the visibility as when generated content is null and the generated image URL is null. That means we are confirming that these will only show up when the app starts, right? After we start giving it some data, like speech to text using ChatGPT or DALL-E models, only then after that these won't be visible. So also here we just paste it, and if we go here, it has been removed. Also, we want this text box to remove, so we can just go right at the top, wrap this container with a visibility widget, and here we can pass in visible as generated image URL is equal to null. So when generated image URL is null, only then will it be visible. But this time it's not visible. That means we only have the unicorn showing. Over here, we didn't use visibility widget right in the image.network part. Here, we didn't use visibility widget because we were calling exclamation mark over here. If there's an exclamation mark, it basically means like it will give us an error like null check operator used on a null value. We don't want that. That's why we have checked with an if condition instead of wrapping it with a visibility widget. If you didn't understand, you can still go ahead and wrap it with visibility widget and see what error you get. Then you'll have a greater understanding of what I'm talking about. Now also, this image needs to have padding from the side. So let's wrap it with a padding widget, and the padding is going to be from all the sides, let's say 10. And there we have it, looks better. Also, I want there to be a curve, so I can just have this image.network rounded by a clip r rect widget, which helps us to give a border radius, and the border radius is border radius dot circular 20. Let's put some commas for formatting, and there we have it. Looks great. If you want, you can increase the padding now, but I don't want to do that. 10 looks perfect, and there we have it. Great. Now let's try to test our app again. Now I'm going to use the GPT model. So we can just ask, what is programming? Let's see if we get the correct answer. And here it says, I'm sorry, but I don't understand the context. So let's say again, what is programming? And there we have it. This is what it said. Now I'm just going to use the context of what it said so that I can generate a better response. So I'm just going to ask it, explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And here you can see programming is like telling a robot what to do. So that means it has access to our context now. And that context is only available because of this thing right here, the messages part. Because of this, it has access to all the context of what we have said, and that's why it's necessary. Of course, if you restart the app, it will forget everything because the messages will again then be empty, and messages will be empty because this thing will run again, OpenAI service. So it will instantiate this to an empty list. So if you want this data to be persistent, you can store it in local storage using SQLite or whatever, but I'm not focusing on it in this tutorial. Now, one of the last parts in this app is now in the floating action button. I just want to show the correct icon. So if we are going to check here, if speech to text is listening. So if speech to text is listening, then I want the stop button to be there. Otherwise, the mic button to be there. And that makes sense, right? So with this, we are able to create a proper functioning app. Now the next part is the animations that we need to add. So let's add those very quickly. So for animations, there are 2 to 3 approaches we can take. First approach is basically building the whole animation on our own. That's not what we are going to do in this tutorial. We are basically going to use the second approach, which is manually using a package and using the classes provided by the package. Because of this, the process can be faster for basic animations. Of course, if you want to create much complex animations, you'll have to do it on your own. But for this one, we are going to use animate_do package. It's a very simple, easy to use app. Of course, you need to restart your app, and then here I've just loaded up my Android emulator so that we can test over here. And it asks us the same thing, and then we can go ahead testing the app. So what I'm going to do is go from top to bottom and add animations to the things I prefer. So basically it's just going to be everything in this app just to demonstrate it to you. You can configure it according to your own liking. First one is this app bar. I just want it to, come down, and it should bounce a little bit. So for that, I'm just going to go over here, wrap the text widget with a widget known as bounce in down. This is given by the animate_do package, and if we do this and restart, you can see it bumps down. After that, we need this. So for this, I need a zoom in effect. So I'm just going to wrap this entire stack with a zoom in widget. If I do this, you can see it zooms in. After that, I need something for the suggestion box. So this, I'm just going to make sure that it comes from here, from the right hand side. So let's just wrap this chat bubble with a widget known as fade in right. Save it, and here you see it comes. Again, let's try it. This drops down, this zooms in, and this comes from the right hand side. Now the next thing is this part right here. We want this to come from the left. So we are just going to have this widget wrapped up with slide in left. Okay. So here it comes. Perfect. Now we can scroll down, and here we want these to come in from the left as well. But here's the problem, if I just wrap this entire column with a slide in left widget, let's do it. All of them come together. I don't want all of them to come together. I want a delay in each and every one of them. So what I'm going to do is in the feature box, wrap them with the slide in left widget. This can't be a const anymore. Here we'll have to pass in a delay, and the delay is going to be, let's say, duration milliseconds. And since we are going to use the same variable again and again for all of them, we are going to have a variable created right at the top. So we can have int start is equal to 200, and also int delay is equal to 200. Since we are here, I've created both of them. You'll understand the purpose of delay in a while, but for start, we are just going to put it. Okay. Here we'll pass in constant. Now if we just start, this comes in. Perfect. But I don't want only this to come. These should also come, but they should only come after this has almost reached its final position. So what I mean is I'm going to wrap this widget with a slide in left widget again. Here the delay is going to be millisecond start, but if I just do millisecond start, they both are going to start and end at the same time. I don't want that. So here the delay is going to be start plus delay. Alright, let's put a const here, and now if you see, if I restart, after it has almost reached, this comes in, and the same thing I want over here. So I'm just going to wrap this with a slide in left widget. Then again I'm going to add this, but this time the delay is going to be 2 times what was over here. So here we had delay as 0, then we added 200 millisecond delay, and this time we are adding 400 millisecond delay. And also we'll put a const over here and save it. Let's restart. And here you see this looks good. Finally, I want this to appear as if it's zooming in again. So I'm just going to wrap this floating action button with a zoom in widget, save it, and let's restart the app. And here it comes. Looks good. And if you want, you can pass in a delay here as well. So this button will only appear once this has come. Okay. So after the last suggestion box comes in, this comes in, right? So let's have 3 into delay. Now let's restart. And you see, after this box comes in, this zoom in effect takes place. Again, let's demonstrate it to you. And here it comes. Looks good. So this was the entire app. We were able to integrate ChatGPT and DALL-E together, and we found a way such that we don't have to hard code to use either of the APIs. We are sure and confident that the correct API will get run and it will generate proper results for us. And this works on Android and iOS. Of course, if you want, you can run it on macOS, Windows, web, anywhere, because we are just using HTTP client, animation package, nothing else. So this was it for the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.